The next step in creating an animated film is the concept art. Concept art is when you design the different elements of your film by making drawings and paintings of them. This is crucial in creating an animated film, since it allows you to find how the film will look before doing anything else. This has 3 key benefits. First of all, it allows you to experiment with different looks and styles much more quickly. Changing a few lines is faster than adjusting an entire 3D model when you are trying to find a look you like. Secondly, if you are multiple people working on a project, it is important to be able to visualize what the goal is, so everyone is working towards the same thing. Otherwise, everyone might make things that look completely different from each other, and your film will not get a consistent look. And lastly, I guarantee you that the finished film will look better if you have done concept art before you start the 3D work than if you haven't. To summarize, concept art is a crucial step in the process and should not be skipped. However, I do know that a lot of people does skip it for the simple reason that it feels very daunting. The reason it feels daunting is that they don't believe they can draw. I used to be like that as well. I would skip any real planning of how things should look and just jump into making them right away, based on some vague idea in my head. This, understandably, led to things not looking as good as they could. For my upcoming short film, I faced my fears, rolled up my sleeves and created proper concept art for it. They are not amazing looking in any way, but they are a great foundation that will allow me to make the work on this film both better and faster to complete. My goal with this video is to show you the process I used to create my concept art. Hopefully, these step-by-step instructions will allow you to get started making concept art for your film as well. Now, you won't win any awards for your drawings right away, since, like most things, drawing takes a lot of practice. However, that is not the point. The point is to have something to base the rest of your work on, to not go empty-handed into the production of the film later. So, in this 2-part video, we will go through 9 simple steps that will help you create finished concept art of everything needed in your film, even if you feel like you can't draw. Let's get started. Step 1. Decide the general style. Making concept art is all about drawing images of the different things appearing in your film. In these paintings, you should try to capture the shape of everything, their details and color, so you know what they will look like. But before we do anything else, we should try to decide the general style of the film. Animation is a completely free medium, and you can do anything. It ranges from ultra-realistic, where you are unsure if it is actually animated at all, to crazy colorful shapes, where you're not really sure what you're watching. Trying to decide at least broadly what your film will be like beforehand will help you a lot. There are of course different ways to define a style of a film, but I personally really liked this triangle, which was shown and discussed in a presentation called The Illusion of Animation by Hjalmarsson. I have linked the complete presentation below for a lot of great thoughts and explanations, but I will summarize it a bit here as well. All films can be placed somewhere in this triangle. In the bottom left corner, we have animation that mimics reality, like photographs. In the bottom right, we have stylized animation, which only keeps the idea and the defining features of something, like how a stick figure represents a person. And in the top corner, we have abstract, where things don't really look like they are supposed to, making it hard for the brain to process what it is actually watching, like a painting by Picasso. Just thinking about where you want your film to fall inside this triangle and placing a dot will be really helpful, since you more clearly know the aim of your film and therefore concept art. I imagine my short film falling somewhere here, with the general shapes being a bit stylized, with some details bleeding a bit into reality. Although this placement isn't an exact science at all, it will still help me when I make decisions further down the line, since I can ask myself the question, will this fit with the general style I'm going for? When deciding for a style, there are a few things to consider. Most importantly, in my opinion, going more into reality means much more work and is much more difficult to pull off. So if you don't have the budget, it can be a good idea to stay away from that corner. Going more into stylized and abstract means you can produce more faster. However, you might feel that a more realistic look is the best for the story you want to tell, in which case that is perfectly fine as well. As long as you have a general idea of the style you'll be going for, we can move on. Step 2. Find references. You have most likely already thought quite a bit about how you want your film to look. When you write the script, you get these images in your head of how you want it to be. So all you have to do is to take that image and put it on paper, right? Well, not really. You might think that you have a clear view of how your film should look in your head, but I bet that if you just try to draw something, like a character, you will realize that you don't really know what it should look like. What seemed so clear in your head doesn't feel so clear anymore. The images in our head are simply just not precise enough to paint directly from. What we have in our heads are faint, fuzzy versions of the general concept we are after. This is also the reason why you can't skip the concept art stage even if you work alone and think you have everything in your head. So, since we can't rely on mental images for details, in order to paint an object really well, we need something more tangible to base it on. In short, we need to look at reference images. Images that are close to what you want your item to look like. For example, when I made this hospital bed, I looked up many images of different hospital beds, and I studied them while painting. This gave me a clear view of common shapes, sizes, and how they worked. I used different parts I liked from different real hospital beds and combined it into a design of my own. So for a hospital bed, I had to look up images, since I luckily have not had to spend a lot of time in my life close to one. But if you just want to make, for example, a chair, you can't possibly need to look at images of chairs, right? I mean, even a 3-year-old knows what a chair looks like. One might think so, but the truth is that we generally know much less about our surroundings and common elements than we think. You sit on a chair every day, but if you had to design one, how high up from the ground should the actual seat be? And if you know that you want the back to have a nice curve, how should it be so it would fit the back of a person comfortably? And how are the legs really attached? For an item to be well designed, it has to be both functional and aesthetically pleasing. By looking at references, you can see how items actually function in real life, as well as get inspired with good-looking designs, covering both function and form. So, where do we look for these references? First of all, on the internet you have billions of images just a search away. No matter what you need to make, you will have so many images of similar items. It has never been easier to check what something looks like than it is now. Secondly, you can use items you own or have access to. The benefit to this is that you can take any image you need or even sometimes look at them directly when working. Another great thing about it is that you can use a ruler to find out the real size of different parts by simply measuring. Now, when looking at references, remember that you can't just steal someone's character straight away or take a particular design. Not just because it is theft, but also because you most likely don't want something copied straight into your film. You want your film to be unique and fit the story you are telling. So instead, look at many different images as inspiration and create a unique combination yourself. A good saying is that if you copy from a single image, it is stealing. But if you copy from multiple images, it is inspiration. Just remember that when designing something based on references, that you pick images and items that make sense to the story. If you want an item to look expensive, for example, because the story is about a billionaire, you should look at what similar expensive items look like in real life and use that to create your design. That way, your design will hopefully look expensive as well. To summarize, the reference images turn the creation of different elements in our film into essentially a 3-step process. First, we take a bunch of reference images close to what we want, and distill them into a unique concept art, images of what we want. Then we will later take that concept art and create the 3D models that will be seen in the film. Now, in this video, we will only focus on the first two parts, since the 3D modeling comes later, but it is important to know what they will be needed for. Step 3. Don't draw it all. So, what should you make concept art for in your film? Simply put, everything of importance. This includes your characters, different locations, as well as some special items used in the film. More specifically, you should create concept art for everything that isn't a generic design. If something needs to be designed by you, it should be designed in drawing first. A character needs a special design to really sell it and to make it recognizable. These things are hard to do right away while creating the 3D model, so do it in drawing. However, I think there are things you can skip to draw to save time, and that are the things that should look completely ordinary and forgettable. For example, I didn't make concept art for the lunch of the old man. Even though it will be in close-ups and is important to the story, the design isn't really that important. I just want it to be a normal plate with a normal pancake and a normal glass. I don't need to plan ahead how they will look. Instead, I can just make them in 3D later right away, especially by looking at reference images while doing it. That way, we have a kind of concept art to base the 3D model on without having to draw anything by ourselves. The concept art is already made in a sense and is available in our references. You can see it as simply skipping the time-consuming drawing phase, going directly from reference images to a 3D model. Another way to save time when doing concept art is to simply not focus so much on the smallest details. Even if you need to plan the shape of a character, you don't have to draw the micro details, like where the wrinkles should go. And if you do add those details, only do it to sell the feeling of the character. When it comes to tiny details, you will most likely tweak and experiment away in 3D anyways, even if you spend the time to make a super realistic painting. So my advice is to not go into much detail. An example of this was when I drew the concept art for the ceiling of the hospital room. Instead of spending time on drawing all the little details, I just drew all the pipes as straight lines. I already know that I just want them to look like completely normal pipes, ventilation pipes, water pipes, etc. I don't need to design them. Instead, I can just look at reference images of these things later when I do the 3D models, getting an equally good result, saving a lot of time. What I needed to capture in this concept art was the layout of everything, where everything should go and how large it should be. This would have been very hard, or at least very time-consuming, to just figure out later in 3D. So that's what I drew, ignoring the other details. Let's also take a look at my robot design. Here I have captured the big picture of the robot. I know all the major parts and how they should move around and interact to make a robot that actually kind of could move in real life. What I don't have are the tiniest little details everywhere. Adding nuts and bolts and whatnot is something I can just do in 3D later without having to plan it in detail. That doesn't have to be decided now, as long as I know the structure of it and the shape of everything. The key point here is that you need images to look at while making a 3D model. The goal is simply to have images of everything that is in the film. So pick what you draw on your own and pick what you just use reference directly for. Note that if you make a very stylized film with exaggerated proportions and such, you might argue that nothing exists in the real world already and that you will need to draw everything. That might be the case for a really high-end result. But if you want to save time, and I think you should, just make the objects based on normal objects and then exaggerate the features. If you, for example, need a fire extinguisher, skip the concept art. Just make a 3D model based on images of a normal fire extinguisher and then exaggerate the features so it fits your style. So, to summarize. Decide what elements need a unique design not found anywhere else, and design those. What items will just be normal everyday items? Don't draw it by yourself. Instead, use references directly to save time. Step 4. Different types. Now when we know what parts of the film we will have to draw, we have to decide in what way they will be drawn. There are basically two types of concept art. The first one is all about finding the look and feel of your film. You do this by painting kind of photographs that shows your world and the way it looks. Imagine that what you are creating already exists and you are just running around with a camera, capturing it from different angles and in different situations, only you do it by painting. For example, here I was simply experimenting with the robot design, so I attempted to paint it as if I stood next to it. Here is a painting I did of a location in the film, where it's like I stood there and took a snapshot. None of these images are great paintings, but they allowed me to visualize the world I was creating. I could actually start to see the film for the first time, just like an audience would. Even if the images aren't very pretty, I could tell if I liked the look and feel of it all. And if I didn't, I could adjust it further by experimenting, until I did. The second type of concept art are the images that will be used directly as a kind of template in the creation of the film, basically a blueprint. When making images like this, we want them to be completely flat in the sense that they have no perspective. This means that no matter how far something is from the camera, it appears the same size. The image shows the real size of everything, with nothing being distorted by the camera. In this robot concept art, we can for example see exactly how big the arm is in relation to the head. By drawing things in their actual size, making everything flat like this, we can always look at the image to see how big something is, making it a great reference when copying it into 3D. Now, we want to draw a 3D shape, so how can we see that shape if everything is flat like this? We do it by drawing it from two sides, both the front and the side. This is the bare minimum, but if the design is intricate, it might be a good idea to also draw it from the back and from above. Then when modeling it in 3D later, we can build it so it matches these different views. This is just like how you have a blueprint to build an item in the real world. So, when should you do which type of concept art? The absolutely best thing is, of course, to do both for everything. For example, if you design a location, you can first basically make a painting of the look and feel of the scene to try to capture that, before going into detail and designing an exact layout. This is what I did for the ending location of my short film, where I drew this view of the scenery before finding the actual layout of the scene that I will trace later in 3D. The same process works well for characters as well if you want to attempt to paint different versions of the character in different poses and angles before you move on to create the final blueprint design where everything is nailed down. However, this all takes a lot of time and you do have an entire film to make, so try to prioritize. List what types of images you feel like you need to make in order to know how your film will look. This concludes the first part in the creation of the concept art. Now we know what we are going to make. In the next part, we will take a look at how we can do it, with a focus on the actual drawing. All the things I share in this video course are things that I learned while making my own animated short film. Please consider supporting its creation by pre-ordering the finished film. It costs €4 and it will help me a lot in being able to spend more time on this video course. Thank you in advance.